Welcome to This is Getting Old. I'm your host, Melissa Batchelor, and today we're going to be talking about how to manage repetitive behaviors in Alzheimer's disease. So, why does a person with dementia develop repetitive behaviors? Things like asking you the same question, maybe telling you the same story, or doing the same thing over and over again. And I think the simplest way to explain it is to talk to you about how the brain develops. So when we're born, your brain in the back is intact. This is where all your feelings and all your emotions live. And your brain develops from the back to the front. And the front part of your brain is your frontal lobe. And it doesn't fully develop until you're about 25 years old. And that is basically the stop sign for your brain. So when something comes to mind that you want to say, your frontal lobe might say, no, don't say that quite yet, or don't say it at all. So what happens with Alzheimer's disease is the brain kind of loses its ability from the front to the back. So again, your emotions, they're intact when you're born, they remain intact throughout this disease process. And if you think about a grape, if you have a healthy brain, then your brain looks like a grape. And what happens with Alzheimer's disease is it begins to shrink and shrivel. And so it basically turns into a raisin. And if you can imagine a raisin and kind of the deep crevices that it has, those crevices make it hard for the messages to get back and forth. So people lose their ability to use and understand language. So eventually when we're talking to them, we basically sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. And so words don't work anymore. And when words don't work, that leaves behavior. So what I'm going to do is talk to you about a problem-solving framework, because there's not like for this repetitive behavior, this is what you do. You're going to have to kind of have what I refer to as a bag of tricks and use what I call the C3P model. And the C3P model is around changing the person, changing the people, or changing the place. So thinking through those three levels, when you is there something we need to change about the person with dementia? Are they hot? Are they cold? Are they tired? Are they hungry? What emotional state do we see them in? Do we need to change the people? And that's the caregivers, that's us, because a lot of times we may do things that we don't mean to set somebody off or cause a behavior, but that's what we're going to get because of something we did with our approach. Or do we need to change the place, change something in the environment? So when we look at the person, the first thing you need to look at is what is the reason behind the repetition? Does it occur around a certain place or a certain time of day? Is the person trying to communicate something to you? So trying to understand what that underlying reason is can be helpful. The second thing you can think about is to focus on the emotion. So I had a colleague the other day, we were having lunch, and she said that her mom would, when she was on the phone, like she would repeat the same phrases. And I've actually had this conversation with my mom before with my grandmother. My grandmother was very concerned about where my uncle was and, was he going to pick her up and, all these things. And she just kept repeating the same, basically the same statements. And I told my mom, I said, her underlying emotion is that she's anxious. And so instead of focusing on the fact that she's said that to you 50 times already, what you need to do is say to her, it sounds like you're anxious, and she was able to kind of talk through and help solve the anxiety because we couldn't solve, where my uncle was and when he was coming back and that type of stuff. The third thing you can do is to turn that action or behavior into an activity and try to make this meaningful. I've done this before with residents that I've taken care of in the nursing home, people that are fidgeting. Maybe they're picking at their clothes, maybe they're scratching their skin. If you give them a meaningful activity to do, and so in this particular example that I'm thinking of, we took a laundry basket of washcloths and towels and took them into this resident and asked her if she would be able to help us because we needed her help in folding these towels. And she did that for about an hour. Like she would fold the whole basket, we'd take it away, we'd unfold everything and bring it back until we still needed her help. And after about an hour, she was not so far in the disease process because she's like, I've been doing your work for an hour and I'm not interested in doing it anymore. So you may have to find different activities, but try to find something that's meaningful and gives them something to do and to focus on. Now let's think about what we may need to change as the caregiver or change the people. So the first thing that you need to think about is always staying calm and being patient. And maybe one of the gifts that Alzheimer's gives people is that they live in the present moment. As caregivers, though, that's really hard for us to do because either we're living in the future, thinking about all the things that we need to do, we've got our agenda, or we're living in the past and we are very upset that this person can't do today what they could do yesterday. So try to remain calm, to be patient, and because while that person's feelings remain intact, their ability to pick up on your feelings also remains intact. So you think about when you walk into a room right now, if you feel like people are aggravated or they're frustrated or they're mad with you, you pick up on that. And so that energy is in the room and they are also going to be able to pick up on that. And another part of the brain that remains intact is this, what I call mirroring. But basically, whatever emotional state I kind of go into the room with, that person's going to pick it up and mirror it back to me. And so being very aware of your own emotions is going to be helpful. And also to stop using so many words, because one of the things that Alzheimer's does is it takes away the person's ability to use and understand language. So if we continue to talk to them, that's going to be frustrating for us because you'll say, well, I've told them 5 times what I need them to do. So I would just kind of take that off the table, and demonstrating what you want the person to do may be a more helpful strategy at that point in time. Again, given that kind of the mirroring. And in my work, I try to help people to eat. And so that's why mimicking uh, what I want the person to do is going to work better than me saying, eat your food. The next thing that you can do is to provide an answer. And if the person's asking you a particular question and you can answer the question, address kind of what emotion you see the person demonstrating, and then try to distract them. And sometimes that will work. The next thing you can do is to just accept what they're doing and kind of go with the flow. A lot of times as caregivers, we have our agenda. So we have 5 things we need to get done today, and we try to push that on that person with dementia. And that typically doesn't work. You think about anybody that comes in and tries to push their agenda on you, you're not going to like it. And I have this activity I do with people in the classroom setting where I have you put your hand up to somebody else's. And so if there was somebody here sitting with me, if I push on your hand, typically people will push back. And so resistance is usually met with resistance. And when I then ask the caregivers to stop pushing and they pull back, this person does too. And so hard to enact as a single person, but hopefully that you can understand that. Basically, resistance meets resistance. And when we pull back and put our agenda kind of behind our back and go with what that person can do right now, and stay present in the moment, that's going to be a lot more effective than trying to continue to push and make this person do what I need them to do right that second, because maybe it's not that important. So in that moment, if you're pushing and the person's resisting you, you need to let that go and come back later that day or the next day, and try to do what it is that you need to get done. The other thing is to also find your own support group and a group of people that you can talk to, because finding that support and sharing your experiences and learning from other people is going to be helpful. But just remember that what worked today may not work tomorrow, what worked this morning may not work this afternoon. And so you really do have to be very flexible and just kind of adjust to what that person's doing, but of course, always maintaining their safety and that type of thing. Another thing you can do around change the place is to think about the environment. And, so if someone's calling you every second and saying, what day do I go to the doctor? What day do I go to the doctor? You can put a calendar up and write, doctor's appointment on it. If you can mark the days, any visual cue that you can give to the person is going to be helpful. So using notes, marking a clock, using calendar, or using photographs, those are things that are going to be that can be helpful. I know for myself, visual cues are like my best friend. So because none of us can remember everything, but that might be another strategy that could help with a repetitive question. The other thing to think through is with the environment is managing noise, because noise can create anxiety, and then anxiety can turn into a behavior that may or may not be very appropriate in the moment. And so when your brain has turned into a raisin, or it's on its way to becoming a raisin, that sensory overload can increase your anxiety, and then you can end up with a behavior that you didn't really mean to get. I can think of another example when I worked in the nursing home shortly after I got out of college. We had one resident that would begin to, like out of nowhere, about 3 o'clock, actually really about every hour and a half, he would start yelling out. He was like, "I'm a bad man. I'm a bad man, bad man, bad man." And I was always like, you could hear him like throughout the entire building. This was like a 6,000 square foot building. And I'd always say, like, okay, well, there's Walter. And instead of giving him an antipsychotic, I was like, he needs to go out for a cigarette. And so we would take Walter outside to smoke his cigarette, and he would come back in, he'd be fine for another hour and a half. And then he'd start back up with the bad man, and we'd go take him out to smoke again. And so he couldn't tell us, "Hey, I'm ready for a cigarette," but we knew from his behavior a strategy that worked for him. And so part of it's knowing that person and then trying different things. And then when you find the thing that works, you go with that for as long as it does. So I hope that this was helpful. Thank you for those of you that put in comments to some of the other videos I've done and asked me the question about how to manage repetitive behaviors. If you have any other questions or topics you'd like for me to talk about, you can drop them in just leave a comment here on the YouTube channel, or go to my website, melissabphd.com. And there's a contact Melissa form that you can fill out. And as soon as I can get to it, I will create a podcast on it. So good luck, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining me today for This Is Getting Old. If you'd like to know more, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you have any questions or a related topic you'd like to hear from me about, just let me know. Thanks.